We're gonna open the hearing. I'm gonna start by reading a letter from the governor dated October 24, 2024 to the executive council. Dear councilors, pursuant to the provisions of Mass General Law 58A, Section 1, I am pleased to nominate Stephen Elliott for reappointment to the Appellate Tax Board. Should the council confer its advice and consent, the nominee's term will commence immediately and expire February 28, 2029. Council Ionel will probably be the only one still here then, but I'm going to introduce the councils currently present. Council Ionella, Council DiPaolo, excuse me, Councilor Jacobs, Councilor Ferrara, and Councilor Marilyn Petito Devaney. I want you to tell us who you got with you.
I'm sorry.
Introduce your friends and family.
Oh, I'm sorry. Stand up. Okay. William Doherty, clerk at the Appellate Tax Board. My wife Kathleen. Chairman DeFrancisco.
He's going to be a witness, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And our newest commissioner, Nicholas Bernier.
All right, Mr. Chairman, you could step into that seat right there, and you want to say a few words on behalf of the nominee?
Be honored to, Councilor. Thank you, and good morning, everyone. It is my privilege to speak to you this morning in support of Steve Elliott's renomination and reappointment to the Appellate Tax Board. I've known Steve since he came on the board, and I can certainly attest to his not only his substantive knowledge of our work, particularly in appraisal, but I think more importantly, his demeanor, his temperament on the bench, and his fairness. And just a little review for those that may not be too familiar with what the Appellate Tax Board does. We function as the state's tax court, so we hear appeals from assessments from all 351 cities and towns, as well as appeals from assessments from the Commissioner of Revenue. We get about 3,000 cases a year, new cases. About 90% of those are property cases. And that's really why Steve is such an important member on the board, because he's got decades of experience as a licensed certified appraiser, real estate appraiser. And a lot of our cases involve commercial properties, hotels, shopping malls, office towers, power plants, as well as single family residences. So he brings a wealth of experience in appraising those sorts of properties, and he speaks the language. We have a lot of expert witnesses that testify at the board in our hearings, and he can cut through the nonsense and get to the meat of it. So another thing that he's been invaluable to the board doing is conducting trial status conferences, which often turn into sort of mediations and boiling down to the crux of the matter. So he's resolved a lot of cases through that, and I commend the governor for making this appointment, and I certainly hope that the council will give its advice and consent to affirm his nomination for another 6-year term.
Appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. I do have one question. What kind of backlog do you have? That's a lot of cases.
Our goal is to get out as many as we get in each
How
year.
are you doing with that? That seems like a
Very close to
big task with that number of cases.
We get a lot of cases, but a lot of them are multiple year cases, especially in the commercial property cases. So we get one decision out, it really affects a number of dockets. And this brings up something interesting. Steve recently heard a case involving Lowe's, one of the big stores in a particular community, and based on his analysis and his recommendation, we promulgated a decision on that, which led to the settlement of other Lowe's stores in other communities. So
they saw what you did in that one, so same issue.
yes,
Gotcha. All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Does anybody have questions? Councilor Devaney.
Nice to see you. Why don't you sit down and come to?
Sure.
Nice to see you again and have the opportunity. Thank you for all your service. Thank you for your leadership. I was very impressed with your letter. I think that I have seen through the years, someone that is caring. Besides, I mean, what he has done is amazing on his board and made you all proud, and you have too. So tell me, when you think of, this nominee's, service, what is any case that comes through that was a little complicated or, different?
It's an interesting question. And whether you,
Well, for example, there are many, but I think our dealing with the Cape Cod Mall was
yes,
significant. That
yes,
was
that's
a
true.
week-long hearing, and there was a lot of.
It was a complicated
Well,
case, not only substantively, but also the dynamics of the litigation were very, very trying, let's just say, and Steve.
Well, we have a great board, and I don't think a lot of people out there know that this is one of our duties to appoint people on the board. And my years, I couldn't be more happier with the people leading here. So we're very lucky. And so I'm glad to see that he is willing to stay on and give more service, and you too. So I thank you for coming. It means a lot.
Council Ferrara.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, thank you. I know Councilor Kennedy put your letter into the file as well, so thank you for submitting that. I appreciate you do there. And I want to ask about my friend Nick Bernie. How's he doing on the board? Doing fine?
We're waiting for him to come in. eh?
Yeah. We're waiting for Mr. Bernier to get renominated. Tara? We're waiting for Mr. Bernier to get renominated as well.
Will you write that down?
Thank you so much for your service. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Okay, anybody else have any questions? Okay, thank you very much. It's okay. All right, floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning. First and foremost, I want to thank the members of the Governor's Council for taking the time to be here today for my reappointment interview. I would obviously also like to thank Governor Healy and Governor Driscoll for my reappointment. When I was appointed 6 years ago, it was an exciting challenge that stood before me. I had not been an employee for more than 38 years, having been self-employed in my appraisal business. Family, my friends, my business partner all wondered how I'd fit in. Truthfully, I did not know. When Councilor Jubenville asked what would I bring to the table to help improve the ATB, I thought I knew. Having been an expert witness at many hearings over the years, I thought I'd figure things out quickly and be able to contribute in a meaningful way. And that did turn out to be the case. I remember my first week, my big contribution was to buy a roll of double-sided Velcro tape and put back all the nameplates that had fallen off the doors. It was a benefit to me because I quickly learned everyone's name. When I started in 2018, I was impressed by everyone I met. I'm sure they were uncertain as to what they were getting with this new kid on the block, but everything started to roll. The ATB provides a tremendous service to the Commonwealth that unfortunately the vast majority of our citizens don't know about, nor are they aware of what we can do for them. The board is constantly striving to become more visible, helpful, with new publications, speaking engagements, and what became, I believe, was one of our best items, which Chairman DeFrancisco referred to, the telephone status conferences. As a board, I believe our major accomplishment was the rewriting and reissuance of our rules of practice and procedures, which became effective in January of 2024. It's a tremendous document. It lays out everything one needs to know in order to operate efficiently and the engagement one has with the board. I wish we had an unlimited budget to get the word out as to what we can do for the Commonwealth. As I mentioned, I am so impressed and so proud of everyone at the board. Our clerks do a tremendous job. They keep everything moving forward, since the pipeline of appeals is a never-ending process. They keep a million balls juggling at all times. Our legal staff, I believe, are the unsung heroes, getting the findings out on a timely basis, presenting the rationale behind the decisions that we make as commissioners, and making them understandable and straightforward. The administrative staff knows where to go, what to do, and to get the answers both for the public and for us. Finally, my colleagues, they bring a tremendous skill set to the table, and they have enhanced my knowledge and understanding of the process and the legalities that I lacked. I in turn hopefully brought a full and more robust understanding of the principles, procedures, and standards of the valuation process to the board. Over the years, we've done things like a weekly lunch gathering where I'd meet with the legal team and they would tell me what I'm doing wrong and I'd hopefully inform them. And that morphed into what became department-wide meetings where we all exchange information, and there's a tremendous amount of team building and sharing that I believe is immeasurable. Finally, I'd like to return to the beginning and thank my wife Kathleen for her constant support and love. She'll probably hit me over the head on this one, but we celebrated our 50th anniversary this past June. I would also like to thank everyone at the ATB for helping me become the best commissioner I can. I'm exceedingly grateful for your support, knowledge, and help. And truly, it is all of you that inspire me every day to seek this reappointment. So hopefully I can continue to contribute and serve the Commonwealth in a meaningful and productive way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilor DePaulo, do you have any questions at the moment?
I don't. I appreciated our conversation, and if there's complaints about your work on the Appellate Tax Board, it's very well hidden, so.
Councilor Jacobs?
A couple questions. I don't want to take up too much time with it, but first off, I very much appreciated our conversation. I tasked you as my first experience with this board to basically give me a education on it, that I very much appreciated. And I appreciate that both of you sort of contributed that to the wider public, who probably does not hear too frequently about the work that you do. One question I wanted to ask was, we, in the course of discussing the work, the percentage of pro se, self-represented, I guess, appellants, or I don't know how you refer to them.
Appellants, yeah.
Which seems pretty high. And so I was just curious from your perspective, if there's anything you would offer in terms of tools, resources, or fixes that might make it a more accessible experience for those who are self-represented in the process.
Well, as I said, I think we're trying all the time. One of the problems is the public doesn't know we're there. And one of the ways they find out that we're there is by going through their city or town assessor's office. And assessors, by and large, do a great job, but sometimes they're not as forthcoming with the explanation of what an individual's options are once they've decided that they are over-assessed. So, as I said, I love a multi-million-dollar marketing campaign to get the word out there for all the individuals who come in. And we have a tremendous amount of them, particularly from the major cities, because there's a lot of pieces and a lot of moving parts, and again, over the past 5 or 10 years, with property values increasing so dramatically, people are at a loss because fixed incomes, low incomes, they every time the tax bill goes up 100 or 200 or 400, in some cases they go up $1,000 in a year. It's devastating. So, we try and do the best we can.
No, I appreciate that. The only other question I wanted to ask was, so you are one of 5.
Correct.
And are the only non-lawyer you're bringing the real estate assessment or appraisal experience to the board. And so my question just really has to do with diversity of perspective on the board. Do you think there's any other area of expertise that would be beneficial as an additive to the mix?
Well, as I said here, I think 5 we have are an amazing crew because they all bring different components. I mean, Chairman DeFrancisco, he was the chief legal counsel for how many years?
More than I'd like to.
Oh, yes. So he brought in that perspective. Commissioner Bernier, he's really the new kid on the block. I said I was, but he's the new one. But he practiced before the board. He's been 10 other things. I can't even keep track of them. But and then we have, excuse me, Pats, as I call them, Commissioner Metzer and Commissioner Good, and they're both phenomenal. Commissioner Metzer, she's had every bit of law and legal expertise from state and federal to private practice, and Commissioner Good came down from the Department of Revenue, so she's got a great handle on all of those kinds of things. So could it be better? Yeah, maybe if they got rid of me, but other than that, it's about as good as it can get.
Thank you very much. I don't have any further.
Thank you, Council Ferrera.
Thank you. I really don't have any questions. Yeah, you've done an amazing job. I appreciate your service. Is there any prediction about what's gonna happen when Boston, if Boston does that commercial rate? You're gonna get slammed?
Probably. I mean, I'm a resident of Boston, so the fact that the mayor wants to keep my tax bill down, I appreciate, but in all honesty, I would prefer not to have a commercial sector go through the. If there's any way to avoid.
You want anything for the Swansea taxes? I'd appreciate that.
All right.
You have my vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
To the van.
Good to see you again.
Likewise.
Thank you so much for meeting me again, because I want to catch up on the last 6 years and meet with you personally, and you have your usual Belgian waffle.
It was delicious per usual.
But I have to say that I can't be more pleased with what you've done, and it is exemplary. I mean, when I think of you in progress, how did they choose you for that position? I mean, that's why I wanted to tell my colleagues how important this position is. And, people think, oh, reappointment. Well, you're not reappointed unless you really have done the job, but you have gone beyond that. And I just want to say personally, I am so pleased with the chair and the members. I couldn't be happier. And in my 25 years, I've only voted, when I first came on, and it was unanimous. There was someone that you won't even get into, but only one. And I am so happy with each one, and even got a letter from a former member, Tom Hammond, who was a wonderful chair, and he said wonderful things about you too. And I hope the chair will read the 2 letters that he did get from your chair and former chair. So, so tell me about that. That I have never seen that in 25 years. Anyone coming here that rose to that position. Tell me how you were chosen.
Well, I believe you're referring to the fact that I was in 2013, the chairman of the Appraisal Foundation.
Right.
And the Appraisal Foundation sets the standards for all licensed and certified appraisers, of which there are about 100,000 throughout the country. The Appraisal Foundation was created as a nonprofit organization. It's not a governmental organization. It is theoretically a scientific operation, but the primary goal is to create uniform standards of professional appraisal practice. I was a trustee. I was nominated as a trustee by the Massachusetts Board of Real Estate Appraisers, who Steve Sousa is the executive director of. And so I served as a board, and then I was nominated and appointed chairman, and then vice chair, and then chairman. Your reference to Congress is that when uniform standards were created back in the late 1980s, it was a document. We were going through the savings and loan scandals and things, and so they decided they needed to license appraisers. And in so doing, they required them to take uniform standards of professional appraisal practice. So the foundation created it, but the foundation has no authority. Congress adopted it as part of the requirements for licensing and certification, and that's the connection. So
But that is amazing, though, for someone, so you made us proud. What I find that comes through in the letters of the former chair and the present chair is that you are patient and you are caring. And, patient, I don't see that we don't see patient, when they talk about a nominee, but I'm just thinking of anyone going before you. It's frightening because you don't know what to expect. And to have someone that's patient, maybe you're not getting the words out right and everything, that means a lot. So the other thing that I did want to mention is that a lot of people don't know, because I know you have helped, and I know the chair and the board has helped. they can help people out there who have a home, and I know someone was helped in Watertown where I live. And you can question your assessment or something that you felt wasn't fair. And you have made it fair, and you have listened to them. And so I want people to know how important this position is on the Appellate Tax Board. So can you tell us anyone that was the most rewarding, that you felt was a little complicated and might be over my head with all the tax business, but
Well, no, I mean, I don't think there is any one in particular. Well, okay, let's back up. So I had a couple come before me, and they had owned a two-family home in a city or town that shall remain nameless. But anyway, they owned this two-family home, and the house next door caught on fire, and their house was damaged significantly. And they tried to communicate this with the assessors, and for some reason, the assessors weren't paying very good attention, and it fell through the cracks or whatever. And instead of their assessment going down significantly because of the fire damage, it went up significantly. And they, again, fixed income, elderly folks, they came before me, and unfortunately, the fire had occurred after the date of value, which meant they really couldn't qualify. But I heard the whole thing, and I kind of looked at the assessors and the attorney for the municipality, and I said, we all understand what has happened here, and I know you can't do anything for this particular fiscal year, but I think you should be able to discuss this, meet, and so we don't have to go through this again. And a week later, contacted by the appellant saying everything had been resolved. So
in your 6 years, have there been changes? What do you see changes in your job and in the tax, arena?
well, I mean, as an appraiser for over 50 years, it's
I mean,
no,
more than that.
It's the principle of change.
Right.
Everything's changing. COVID impacted values significantly. Now we're coming out of COVID. Now we're going to see what happens. The rise in interest rates, all of these things are impacting value on an ongoing basis. And one of the biggest problems, and maybe to your question, Councilor Jacobs, we've got the situation where a lot of people don't understand fiscal years, the date of value versus the date on the tax bill. And that's a constant explanation.
So tell us how many years you've been at this before this board.
Well,
Including.
I graduated from college and went to work at the Boston 5-cent Savings Bank in 1974. So you can do the math. I think it works.
Well, we are so fortunate, really. Do you see changes now that are happening, or not really with the economy or anything?
Sure, all the time, from day to day. I mean, the elections just happened, so who knows what that's going to be.
Right. Well, I thank you, and I'm so pleased that you're willing to take on another 6 years, and I'm glad I'm here to be able to vote for you for another 6 years. And I thank the chair and all of us. I couldn't be more pleased. We have the best appellate tax board in the country. We really do. Good people that really care. So thank you.
Appreciate it.
That's all you know.
Yeah, quick question, how many people go pro se, if any?
Oh, many. You'd be surprised. I
Look
mean,
at the experts and.
well, on your single family home or your two-family home, A, they don't want to spend the money on an appraisal, and B, they're certainly not going to, no offense, they're not going to spend the money on an attorney. They're going to try and do it themselves. And that's where I think we all come in and try and be as helpful as we can and assist them as much as we can.
And this, I'm not that familiar with the report tax, but it's 5 of us?
5 commissioners.
5 commissioners, yeah. Yeah, I think you're doing a great job from what I told you, a friend of mine, Dave Saliba, he thinks you're the best. He says, he's the personal, this is the guy who that's number one, that's important. Listen to you, treat everyone. No matter what your decisions, you treat everyone with dignity and respect, and that's, and we can't ask anything more than that. So, your Councilor Kennedy is a strong supporter, and when your name comes before the council, I'll be more than happy to support you.
Thank you very much.
Right, congratulations on your nomination. Keep doing a great job. We're adjourned.
Nominate Ira Gant to the position of Associate Justice of the Superior Court. I submit this nomination for the advice and consent of the Executive Council pursuant to Part 2, Chapter 2 of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Sincerely, Maura Healy, Governor. Good morning, good to see you.
Counselor, thank you so much.
Before we hear from you, I know you have some distinguished people here. Let's hear from them first. And I have your witness list here. We'll first hear from Lisa Kavanaugh. Good morning. You can sit or stand, whatever's easier.
Thank you. Am I okay to go?
We're ready.
Great, thank you. My name is Lisa Kavanaugh. I am the director of the CPCS Innocence Program, which is a unit of the Public Defender's Office that identifies and fights to correct wrongful convictions across the state. And it is my immense honor and pleasure to be able to speak in support of Ira Gant's nomination as a justice of the Superior Court. I met Ira 11 years ago when I hired him to join me as the Innocence Program's first ever staff attorney. And over the next 7 years, Ira became an indispensable partner and colleague in all aspects of my work. We collaborated on amicus briefs, presented together at statewide and national training programs, made decisions about which cases to accept and take on for full investigations, and relied on one another to find the most effective ways to represent our clients. He went from knowing virtually nothing about DNA to serving as the state's leading expert on post-conviction DNA testing and literally writing the chapter in the book on DNA. A gifted writer and patient mentor who was infinitely generous with his time, endearing him to every colleague, intern, panel attorney, expert, investigator who had the opportunity to work with him. His compassion toward his loved one, toward his clients and their loved ones was also evident in every aspect of his work, from the care that he took investigating and preparing and revising his written motions to the time he spent listening and incorporating his clients' perspectives into his work on their behalf, to the care that he took ensuring that their loved ones also understood what can often be an impenetrable and excruciatingly lengthy process. Although he is a brilliant and accomplished litigator, trainer, and advisor, I believe that it is Ira's kindness and patience that find him. And those traits will undoubtedly define who he will be as a judge, if confirmed by this council. They carry through every aspect of his work, from his support of the dozens of lawyers who've come to him for help over the last 10 years, to his conversations with clients and their loved ones, to his attentiveness to me and to the other members of our close-knit staff. He has a way of making clear to whoever he's interacting with that they matter, that he's listening, and that your concerns are legitimate and important, and he will give whatever time is needed to address them. When I think about how intimidated I was when I first appeared in the Superior Court as a trial judge on behalf of a client, and more importantly, how intimidated many of my clients were to face the consequences that flowed from being in that room, I'm positive that as a judge on that court, Ira will find a way to put every litigant and lawyer who appears before him at ease, conveying that their case matters, and that he will listen to them with compassion and an open mind. For all of these reasons, I support Ira's nomination to the Superior Court, and I will happily answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Any of the councilors, Councilor Jacobs?
Thank you. Well, it's good to see you in this chamber again so soon after just recently getting to meet you for the first time. Thank you for your words. Thank you for the work that you do on the Innocence Project. It's amazing. I'm curious, your name shows up a couple times in the application for cases you've had together. I'm curious how many cases altogether going back you have had experience working with our nominee.
Ira and I worked on every case that he had for the Innocence Program very closely. I think, I don't know that I have a total number, but
Dozens or?
I mean, I think between the cases that he himself litigated and the cases that he was shepherding through the DNA testing process or consulting on, yes, it would be dozens.
So based on that, I'm curious if your experience of Attorney Gant in moments of high pressure, high stress, how you would describe his demeanor in the most heightened times.
he's the person that you want to have in the room when you are at your most stressed. He's also unbelievable. I mean, I've never seen someone who can remain as calm as he does in the face of tremendous stress. I think, you know, I've been present for all of the evidentiary hearings and arguments that he's handled, all of which are very high stakes. And I've always been struck by how calm he is and how able he is to take a breath if there's something that he didn't anticipate, and to take the space that's needed to respond appropriately. He's never someone who panics. And I think he knows when to need more time, and he knows how to ask for it calmly.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I have no further.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilor DePaula.
Just real briefly, thank you for your work on the CPCS Innocence Program. How does the Innocence Program go about identifying clients?
So we have an application process, which means that people can apply directly on their own behalf by submitting a questionnaire. Or we can accept applications from loved ones on behalf of someone who's incarcerated, or also a referral from an attorney. So we get cases from all of those areas. Often we've had a lawyer who's working on a case and identifies, this is a client who says that they're innocent, and I think I need your help.
And sorry to interrupt. So when I assume the committee decides that something's meritorious to take on, is there typically like a backlog of people who you'd like to be representing and the capacity isn't there, or is it? How does that work?
I'm smiling at the committee because the committee is every person on my team,
Yeah.
from our administrative assistant to our investigator to our paralegal to all the interns, and we all participate in the decisions every week. We actually had to reschedule our meeting today until the afternoon. We don't have a backlog in the sense that we're fortunate to have the ability to assign counsel, whether we're doing it in-house or assigning a panel attorney in every case that we identify that has potential merit. But it does take time for us to get from receiving an application to making the determination that there's a basis to move forward with an investigation. I would say that what takes the longest time is actually doing the investigation itself. Most of the cases that I can think of that I worked on, he was still working on when he transitioned into his new position in the forensics unit.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Councilor Devaney.
Nice to see you. That's an interesting name, Innocence Program. I'm just curious, how did they get that name?
So the program started in 2010 when the Public Defender's Office received a federal grant from something called the Wrongful Convictions Review Program. And initially it was, the name was not selected by me, but it was, the idea was that the Public Defender's Office ought to have a unit that was specifically focused on developing expertise on the causes of wrongful convictions and making sure that cases that present red flags for wrongful convictions can get the attention they need. So the program name was established before I started, but we're part of a national network of innocence organizations that have a wide range of names. I always laugh that ours is one of the longest, because if you actually spell out Committee for Public Counsel Services Innocence Program, it's a mouthful.
So tell me the beginning, how this nominee and organization got together and you contacted him or he contacted you. Tell us about that.
Sure. So I received a federal grant in 2013 in partnership with a number of other subrecipients, including 2 prosecutors' offices in Suffolk and Middlesex County, 2 clerks' offices in Middlesex and Suffolk County. And the grant on my end allowed me to hire a staff attorney. So I initially hired Ira on that federal grant, and the focus of his work was on post-conviction DNA testing cases. When he joined, the state had just established its first ever post-conviction law that specifically was focused on helping people get DNA testing. So Ira's job initially was to be in charge of developing litigation around that statute and helping shape the law on DNA issues. Once his grant funding ended, I convinced the Public Defender's Office that he was indispensable. And so he became a state-funded employee. And then at that point, he was able to expand to start working on non-DNA cases as well as DNA.
Right. Can you think of one of the cases that he was involved in that was so impressive to you about his caring, his compassion, his dedication?
Absolutely. So the client who comes to mind, and I did sort of think about this a little bit ahead of time, is Stephen Pina. Stephen Pina was wrongfully convicted in 1996 of a murder he's always maintained he didn't commit. And he had already been in prison for 19 years of a life sentence when I first learned about the case. He'd begun to develop work on the case, but really needed a lawyer who was going to be undaunted by the true jigsaw puzzle of DNA and eyewitness identification and complex psychiatric issues. And it turns out the person he needed was Ira. So Ira initially got involved in his case to kind of supervise and oversee the DNA testing, but his knowledge and expertise as it grew led me and him together to decide that he should be the lead counsel. He was able eventually to prevail in getting on day of execution of sentence, so his case is still pending. But Ira's sort of tenacity and persistence and just the sheer breadth of issues that he needed to master and present persuasively.
So what was the time frame? Years and years? How long have you been working together?
So he started in my unit in 2014, in January of 2014, and he was with my unit until March of 2021 when he was hired as or maybe January. He was hired as the forensics director. And ironically, I think I envisioned that job was the absolute perfect job for him. So his work and training on innocence program cases made him the ideal candidate for the forensic services director position.
So, what attribute do you think, knowing him, working closely with him, he brings to the bench?
I think I would say kindness and patience are the attributes that I would highlight for him.
Thank you. Your testimony means a lot.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll hear from, thank you. Next, we'll hear from Benjamin Szymanski, First Assistant Clerk Magistrate. Clerk of Court, select. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Chairperson and members of the Governor's Council, I thank you for this opportunity and the honor and privilege to speak with you all today regarding my friend, Gant. I come before you to support my friend in his nomination as an Associate Justice of the Massachusetts Superior Court. Again, as you've heard, my name is Benjamin Szymanski, and I'm the First Assistant Clerk Magistrate of the Franklin County Superior Court. I've had that role since 2013, and during that time, I've clerked over many of Ira's hearings. And I've read his pleadings and witnessed his interactions both in and outside of the courtroom with his fellow attorneys, opposing counsel, witnesses, members of the public, and court staff. During these interactions, Ira has demonstrated a high level of professionalism. He has shown great integrity and respect for everyone with whom he comes into contact. It is undeniable that Ira holds the utmost respect for all involved in a case, not only his client. Our staff has consistently commented through the many years that I've known Ira of how wonderful their interactions have been. Ira's love of the law is unquestionable. He has the reputation as a highly effective and well-prepared lawyer. He and I have discussed changes in the law, complexities in litigation, ways to ensure all parties in a case understand the court events and transparency of information. All of this taking place outside of the cases in which Ira will be arguing. Ira understands that the attorney's job is to represent the best interest of their client, but also to ensure the integrity of this important institution. He takes pride in the motion practice and his submitted pleadings are always thoughtful and well drafted. Takes on complex areas of law with sincere conviction. He is an excellent writer and orator. He practices law with the highest degree of ethics. He listens and communicates clearly. He exhibits empathy and compassion not only for defendants, but also for victims. and their families and other interested parties. He seeks to ensure that fairness and justice prevail. He can often be seen meeting with opposing counsel, negotiating in the hallways, thinking outside of the box to find solutions that best serve justice and his client. Ira does not shy away from difficult situations and circumstances. His approach has gained him the respect of the court, opposing counsel, and all of those interested. As a Massachusetts resident member of the bar, clerk-elect, I'm honored and thankful to Governor Healy for the nomination of Ira to this Governor's Council for consideration to join the honorable group of Superior Court justices that I've grown to love. If confirmed, I'm sure that Ira will demonstrate honor, balance, and patience upon the bench. He will stand for truth and honor. In closing, I would like to thank all of you for the time that you've given me, and please consider Ira Gant for the nomination to the Superior Court bench.
Thank you very much, Counselor Jacobs.
It's wonderful to see you here today. Congratulations again on your well-deserved new position as our clerk of courts for Franklin County. And, you know, your opinion means a lot to me. In all disclosure, we've known each other for a little while now, and I have tapped you for your insight into various potential nominees, and I always really value how straightforward and straight shooting and perceptive you are. And so I really don't have any questions for you today. It's really just a comment on, it's really great to see you, and I very much appreciate all that you've offered for this particular nominee.
Thank you very much, Counselor Devaney.
Thank you. Welcome. As you know, a witness is here to tell us what you know about so we can learn more about the nominee. But first, I want to know about you. I have never seen this before. You have quite a title. And I was wondering if you could explain it to me. You're a first assistant clerk magistrate, clerk of courts elect. I've never seen that before. What does this all mean?
So since 2013, I took on the role, starting with the assistant clerk, and then shortly thereafter became the first assistant clerk magistrate of the Franklin County Superior Court. And then this past November, the members of Franklin County, the citizens of Franklin County, have voted to be the clerk of court.
Is this on the ballot?
Yes.
Oh.
My boss, Susan Iman, who I
okay.
care deeply for, is now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Oh, so it's elect, so it's January. Congratulations. So, how long have you known this nominee, and how many times have you seen him in his job?
You know, it's funny. I've known Ira for 10 plus years. It seems like when I came on as an assistant clerk, I think Ira had started a case, and it just came to us meeting each other, and we would work. Let me overstate this, so please forgive me, but roughly almost every month he was either in court or we were on the phone discussing matters associated with this case. So I've known Ira, again, just the short answer is 10 plus years, quite frequently.
So you observed him in his cases? So, what does he bring to the court to you when you observed his demeanor?
So I love that question. And the reason I do is because Ira, I always try to come up with one word to really sum up who a person is. And I kept coming up with, after discussing and having this conversation with a friend of mine, equanimity. He brings this balance, this calm, this certainty and confidence as he enters a courtroom. You don't know if he's having a great day or a bad day, because it's always balanced. It's truly wonderful to watch Ira in courtroom because he cares deeply for what he's doing there. It's unmatched.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, you're referring to this. So, is there any one case that you really were so complicated, or it was a little different?
In counsel, yes, I can't speak deeply on it as there is current still litigation taking place on that case. But yes, there's one case that Ira has worked on over this entire time that I've known. It's one case. It's very complicated, has a lot of issues associated with it. There's one instance that took place in this case, which I believe answers your question. Ira had a hearing with his opposing counsel. The judge made a determination that the defendant should be released. Ira and his opposing counsel get along very, very well. In fact, I believe he has commented very kindly towards Ira in this process. But in that, I watched this gentleman released from custody. I watched Ira stand there with a group of law students. And instead of what you expect, the high five, that celebration moment, he didn't have that. He took a step back and said, I'm paraphrasing heavily, but hey, we don't celebrate our victories with high fives. We don't celebrate our losses with tears. We celebrate the progression of justice. And this is maybe the win today, but it doesn't mean anything for tomorrow. And to me, that's what encapsulates the reason Ira deserves to have that nomination, is he truly loves the jurisprudence that's produced within those sacred walls.
That's great. No, your testimony is really tactful, and I appreciate that. And I wish you all good luck in your new position.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That will exhaust the list of witnesses speaking in favor of the nominee. Is there anyone here who would like to speak in opposition? No one in opposition. We will hear from the nominee, but before we hear from the nominee, if you want to introduce any friends or family, you can hear that now.
Thank you so much, councilors. I would love to introduce my friends and family and supporters. You've heard from Lisa Kavanaugh and Ben Szymanski. This is Mr. Clerk-elect Szymanski's wife, Kathleen, my wife, Sandy, who is here. He also works in the Innocence Program. Melissa Deneen, who's CPCS's training chief. And I'm also very fortunate to have Chief Justice Ricciuti here supporting me as well. Well, first of all, good morning, councilors. Good morning again. Thank you all for considering my nomination and for the time that each of you spent talking and meeting with me. I appreciate the work that each of you do and that this body does, and then your commitment to this important constitutional role. Thank you of course, to Governor Healy and Lieutenant Governor Driscoll for nominating me, Chief Legal Counsel Paige Scott Reed and Deputy Legal Counsel Derek Kesselheim for helping me navigate this process, to the members of the JNC for their hard work, to Valerie McCarthy and her staff for providing invaluable assistance, even on Saturdays when I was trying to figure out what exactly I needed to do, and to you, Councilor Ainella, for your help and guidance for today's hearing. As I said, I'd also like to thank Chief Justice Ricciuti for being here today, to Lisa Kavanaugh and Clerk-elect Szymanski for testifying on my behalf. And I want to take a special moment to thank Clerk-elect Szymanski and his wife for making the long trip from Western Massachusetts to be here today. I think they left at 6 a.m. To be here. I imagine Jacobs might have done the same, but I appreciate them coming and doing that. Lastly, I want to thank everyone who offered their time, advice, and support during this process. There's too many to name. Their encouragement and all of your encouragements and honest conversations with me were critical throughout this. I want to specifically express my love and gratitude to my wife, Sandy, to my parents and my family and friends who are watching from all over the country but couldn't be here today. Quite literally, without them, I would not be here. The only person that's not here that I wish was here, who is and who's not able to watch, is I have a younger sister, Christy, who passed away far too young. She was, next to my wife and my mom, probably my biggest supporter. And if she was here, she would be over the moon. She would probably be sitting here next to me and wouldn't let Clerk Szymanski or Lisa sit here next to me, and she would be here. As it is for many, my family is my rock, my base. My family is a family of public servants. I can't go through all of them, but my mom spent her career as a paramedic. My stepfather was a Marine and then a career firefighter and a paramedic and a SWAT team medic with the police department in the town where I went to high school. My father was a career Marine. His brothers were Marines. My grandfather served in the Navy. My stepmother was a career public school teacher. And my wife, Sandy, who I keep referencing, she's a career public defender herself, now in federal court. In each of their professions, in each of their lives, my family led and leads by example. And they've instilled in me and reinforced a commitment to finding my path and serving my community, to help. I've endeavored to do that my entire professional life, and I would continue to do so on the bench. Thanks to the Marine Corps, as you can tell that I had a lot of Marine Corps in my family, I went to 6 different primary schools and moved several times before middle school and high school, back and forth across the country. Hawaii, Colorado, California, North Carolina, back and forth and points in between. I'm often asked, and a couple of you asked me during this process, that if it was difficult being uprooted and moved, having to quickly land on your feet in someplace new, especially as a child. And the truth is, like most military brats, I never knew any different. You learn quickly to assess a situation, hit the ground running, and roll with the punches. And I try to carry it today. My family worked hard and expected us to work hard too. I had many, many jobs growing up before I found my career in the law. As a teenager living in North Carolina, I bagged groceries, worked on farms, flipped burgers at a McDonald's. In college and afterwards, I worked as a stagehand, a movie theater projectionist, in construction, in retail, as a janitor, and as a tutor in literacy and math. Each job threw me into different communities and into different situations with different people, with different life experiences. But it was that tutoring and a conversation about doing more in the community that led me to become a guardian ad litem in North Carolina, to investigate claims of neglect or abuse from children who have been removed from their homes, and to represent the best interest of those children in family court. And it was that tutoring and that guardian ad litem experience that ultimately led me to come to Massachusetts to go to law school and become a public defender. On this journey, I've been fortunate to have some fantastic mentors. My first boss in Fall River, Carlos Brito, was a tireless teacher, especially to a young lawyer who found himself on the South Coast living and working in Fall River, New Bedford. Lisa Kavanaugh, who you all have heard from, my boss and mentor at the Innocence Program for 7 years, taught me more about the law and people than I could list for you in 5 confirmation hearings. In my career, I have been in courts across the Commonwealth. I've seen people on the worst days of their lives and on some of their very best days. I stood next to those found guilty as they were taken into custody, and next to the wrongfully convicted when they walked out of prison freed, exonerated, 30 years. I have visited people in jails and in prisons, sat next to them as they're shackled, sat in their homes, met with families, with victims, with police and community leaders. These experiences and my role as an advocate have helped me view a case, parties and the people involved in the legal issues at play from as many angles, to keep an open mind, to dig down, to ask questions, and above all, to listen. To the outside world, criminal cases can seem very black and white. Defendants and victims, police and attorneys. To me, they're people and communities. And these experiences reinforce for me that the world is complex and that people are far more than the worst thing they've ever done or the worst thing that's ever happened to them. And at the end of the day, our courts are full of people in need. From my very first duty day in New Bedford District Court to my last trial in Suffolk Superior and my last argument at the SJC, I have done what I could do to help, and I would continue to do so if confirmed. Over the years, my practice expanded across the Commonwealth and in complexity. I've sat on committees with police and prosecutors working to improve outcomes in the legal system outside of individual cases. I developed somewhat of an expertise in forensic evidence and complex evidentiary issues. I don't want to misrepresent. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a forensic analyst. I've never worked in a laboratory. I've toured them and been in them quite frequently. But as I tell attorneys in trainings and students in my clinical program, I studied poetry in college, particularly medieval poetry like Beowulf and the Canterbury Tales. But as a lawyer faced with scientific and technical evidence in cases, I did the research. I was informed by experts. And I didn't just want to present exculpatory DNA evidence on behalf of a client. I wanted to understand the science and how it informed justice. I dedicated so much of myself to learning about forensic and scientific evidence and the roles that they play in cases that I eventually led trainings to inform others. At my core, I never tire of learning or trying to understand or trying to help. Whether civil or criminal, I know that the Superior Court will offer a similar breadth of issues and problems. If confirmed, I would bring these experiences, lessons, and skills to the Superior Court and to the litigants and cases that come before me. Thank you all for considering my application. Thank you all for having me here today. I'm honored to be nominated, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Let me introduce the councilors here, Councilor Kennedy, Councilor DePaula, Councilor Jacobs, Councilor Ferrara, Councilor Marilyn Petito Devaney. Councilor Kennedy, do you have any questions?
I do, thank you. You know why the shooting's here, right?
I do, yes.
He wants to make sure I ask the right questions about case flow management. Because that's what he cares the most about, is case flow management. He's in charge. There's been a big push on lately, as you probably know, to move cases along. A lot of times, defense lawyers, you were one of them, sometimes run into prosecutors as well, one of the difficulties with witnesses, run into difficulties with, as you mentioned, family matters, vacations, things like that. You got a case in front of you as a Superior Court judge. It's queued up for trial. It's like 2.5 years old, relatively serious case, number of witnesses. And Terry Kennedy walks in there and says, I'm going to Hawaii next week. Can we kick this a couple of months? I'm going with my family. I know it's an old case. I know that that's an issue. And I know the DA's objecting. You know, what are you going to do?
I appreciate that. I was born there, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that question. Notwithstanding the Chief Justice Ricciuti's concern, and I'm sure what will be impressed upon me, my concern as well, about timelines and how long a case has been kicking around. I've been in exactly the situation that you're describing, Councilor Kennedy. And while it would certainly be important to try to keep a sense of when the case could be heard and when the trial could happen, I also understand that people have lives. You know, people.
He's only going to care about moving the case. He's not going to care about my life.
Well,
The fact that my wife's going to be mad when I can't go on vacation. He's going to want to move that case, and he's going to be putting pressure on you, like he does every other Superior Court.
well, with all respect to hopefully my future boss, Councilor Kennedy, I mean, I understand that, but unfortunately, I can only look at the case that's in front of me and the attorneys that are in front of me. And if you've told me that you are going to Hawaii and you've bought tickets and you can't be here, then we have to figure out a new date.
Going to be getting that call. Why did you continue this case? What's going on here? We got to move this case. It's way outside of time standards.
I hope that of the things I'll face in the Superior Court, that call will be the less complex thing I'll have to struggle with.
You don't have a problem with getting away from Superior Court. You guys are too moving. But we go on vacation. But we had a great conversation on the phone, pretty longer than I do with most nominees, actually.
I appreciate it.
And it became very, very clear to me that we're on the same page on a lot of things. I think you saw it as well. You have this incredible resume. You know, when you first got nominated, I got a call from Council Iannelli. Your council was a big sport. He said to me, "You see this guy? He's the real thing." That was his attitude. Like, you know, and you are. It's very obvious. You've done it all. You've got great experience. You've got an incredible resume. I have an issue with the fact that you moved out of Hawaii. I would have stayed there, but that's a different. That might show something.
Take it to the Department of Defense, Councilor Kennedy, Marine Corps.
I spend I'm in court every day. I do a lot of criminal defense work, as you probably know. But and I spend a lot of time talking to various bar advocates and CPCS lawyers, and I gotta tell you, the word that kept being used over the last couple of weeks since you got nominated, everybody loves him. He's a legend. That's what I kept hearing over and over and over, legend. And the question becomes, how can I vote against that legend?
I'm honored.
I'll be voting for you next week, and I'm really looking forward to you being on the bench.
Appreciate that, Councilor.
Thank you very much. Councilor DePaulo, any questions?
Yes, so let's say I come in and say, Your Honor, Terry Kennedy has bought me a trip to Hawaii. Is that too attenuated, or will I get consideration?
I think I'll have to look at all the facts of the case and exactly what the dates and your type of. If you're going together and it's the same hearing, I mean,
I imagine that's an eventuality that may come to fruition.
I'll go to Hawaii. That might be very nice.
We had a good conversation, and I appreciated what you had to share. And actually, Councilor Kennedy and I spoke about the conversation you had with him as well. So I'll just ask one question around things that you went to Northeastern for law school, committed to social justice. You won the Social Justice Award there.
I did.
That must mean you were quite a standout in that field. What led to that award?
Well, not to oversell myself, I believe that I was given that for the fact that I worked as a guardian ad litem and at a paralegal, the public defender's office, before law school, so I believe they gave me that money to help me come to Northeastern.
Oh, that was a preemptive.
It was a preemptive
I see.
social justice award.
Well, I felt great about our conversation. I think you have a tremendous amount of empathy for the folks who will be before you, and I look forward to supporting your nomination.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you very much. Counselor Jacobs.
Good morning, good to see you. I want to say I appreciate you coming out and sitting with me out in North Adams. Really rich conversation, covered a lot of ground, a lot of topics, got to know you pretty well, I feel like. I only have a couple of questions for you, really. I wanted to hear from you what your thoughts are in the event that you are seated and covering civil session. What preparation you've had around covering topics outside of the criminal side?
Sure, that's a great question. I'm fortunate in that the time I spent doing civil commitment trials in Superior Court used the rules of civil procedure. So learning them won't be totally foreign to me. It'll be a little bit more of a refresher from the time I spent doing those cases, but it will be a learning curve, certainly. I mean, I've been spending my career doing criminal defense work. And when I was fortunate to be nominated by the governor preemptively, I started to dig in a little bit more about some of the civil caseload that Superior Court has, reminding myself, refreshing myself on the rules of civil procedure, also some of the more civil cases they have, the medical malpractice tribunals, things that I may ultimately see. No doubt my learning will not stop with caring for that, as I already have, but I also have reached out already to people I know who are already on the bench and have identified some who are knowledgeable and who are mentors, and I'm sure I'll continue to lean on them.
Appreciate that. I appreciate the jumping right in and preparing yourself. Looking at the long list of it looks like MCLE classes that things that you've written. I mean, it goes on and on. How many, conferences that you've presented at. Can you just sort of reflect back all of this expertise, how you think it'll benefit your Superior Court at large, but how you actually conduct yourself? The focus that you've had and the expertise that you bring.
Sure. I actually think, I mean, although this sounds like I'm not answering about the trainings, I think that what's led me to do those trainings and do those conferences are the things that I've learned and the experiences I've had. And I think that's what will really help me sitting on the bench, is both sort of the eagerness and hunger I have for learning things that I don't know. I mean, listening to people that know more than I do, and then keep asking questions until I'm either confident that I know or someone says, no, you're not quite getting it. Keep learning. Because I try to get to that point where I feel comfortable explaining it to someone else. I mean, I think that's a little of the bread and butter of being a litigator, right? Is like trying to figure out a way to explain this to someone who's not a lawyer, to a jury, or explain it to a judge who hasn't looked at it before. And so all of those experiences, teaching at MCLEs, last year I was asked by one of the assistant U.S. attorneys to talk about digital forensic evidence to JAG attorneys. And so it's really about feeling comfortable and coming to the place of looking at a topic from as many angles as possible and learning about it. Or if I don't understand, saying I don't understand, that I'm not in a position, I'm certainly not going to put myself out to something that I don't. So I think that all those things will aid me on the bench.
I have two more things, but one is just coming out of what you just said. I appreciate it. I feel like the conversations that I've had out in the world with people who've been judicially involved, incarcerated and otherwise, reflected back has been sort of a through thread of people who've had the best of experiences with our courts versus the worst. The difference being having a judge who really is both respectful and patient and all those things, but also really listens and sees the people for who they are, and reflects back an understanding of their experience, and even if the outcome is not in their favor, that sense of being seen and heard and respected makes a big difference in how people feel after having come to court. And so all that to say, I heard that reflected in sort of the undertone of what you just said, and so I appreciate that. The last thing I want to say is really a more comment than a question. We discussed it briefly, but I just want to share it here today. How much I appreciated your writing, both in the application itself, but we have the application, we get a writing sample. And your writing sample was probably the most, for me as a non-lawyer, the most accessible to me, the most clear narrative, a horrifying narrative, but clear narrative. And I just appreciate that, given sort of my personal desire to see access to justice delivered in all the ways, but one of the ways being that the way that, you know, language in writing and just in delivery in the courts become as accessible as possible, regardless of whether someone is an attorney, if you're self-represented, of course, but even if you have the best of representation, everyone sitting in a courtroom should understand what's happening. And so you know, reading the writing sample that you offered, there wasn't a single moment that I had to go look something up or reread it to understand what you were saying. It was just so well presented. And so I just wanted to thank you for that. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much, Council Ferrara.
Thank you. Sorry that I missed your call, I was traveling, but I did come back for your hearing today. So, and I did read all your things here. I am always advocating for people in my district to get appointed as judgeships who know the area and know the people and know the needs and can meet those. How do you feel about that, having judges appointed in the geographical area that they live?
I think it's important. I agree with you. I mean, I'm sad that I no longer live in Bristol County.
Oh, my.
I'm sorry to, I got married and then we moved.
Oh, I see.
But I did enjoy the time that I lived in Fall River, New Bedford. But to your larger question, I think.
You've come an awful long way from cleaning projector equipment just 20 short years ago. Your resume is quite astounding. Curious, you know, you had the grandfather in the state police and your father in medics, SWAT stuff, and you went to the defense side. What happened?
Well, that's an interestingly phrased question. I'm fortunate to have been very supported by my family and the things that interested me. I can say that my time in regarding ad litem, where I was meeting with police and social workers and school officials, I certainly see the difference in the positions that everyone has, right? Like police have a very important function in society, and police, like other first responders, have very hard jobs. But I wasn't interested in becoming a prosecutor or becoming a police officer. As I was working through the law, I was sort of fascinated by those who were standing up and arguing for folks' civil rights when I was paralegal at the Public Defender's Office. And so as I went through law school, I worked for the U.S. Department of Justice as an intern. I had an internship with the Supreme Court of Arizona. I dabbled in one of these areas. Am I truly still interested in wanting to be a criminal defense attorney? And ultimately I still was, and that's the way that things fell down. But I should not communicate, and I hope my application doesn't, that doesn't mean that I don't understand or see the complex and really fast-paced aspect of police work and decision-making they have to go through, not just for my own family and their lives and what they explain to me, but just for my own cases and from the police that I've interacted with.
Appreciate that. Now, I know you have a big fans of, you're a fan of Councilor Kennedy, Councilor Elliott, which means a lot to me. I do appreciate Councilor Kennedy wanting to go to Hawaii every other week. However, on the civil side of things, I've seen abuses, I think. I've been an attorney for over 30 years, and mostly with medical malpractice cases where the defense lawyer comes in and says, God, I'm sorry, but I don't have anything in my calendar for 20 months. My next available trial date, and the case is already 4 years old. What are you gonna do?
Well, as I've seen in criminal cases anyway, I mean, you do the hard work. In fact, I had a Superior Court judge a couple of years ago say to me like, well, I hear that everybody has calendar problems, but everybody has calendar problems always. This case has to go. So let's sit down and find a time. I mean, I've even seen judges, and I think it's actually very creative, and like, let's print out a calendar, like, let's sit down and figure out a time that this is going to happen. I mean, I think part of that is trying to push through people that are just coming up with, I can't do this because I don't have a witness, or because, as an attorney said to me recently, like, because my client hasn't finished paying his bill, you know, and be like, well, like, this case has to go forward because we have other cases, and also this case is here in front of us. And so I think that the role of the judge is to not just accept it at face value, but to ask questions and to keep pushing things forward. And not just because of the calendar and because we have timetables, but because this case is before us, there are parties that are interested, whether they're the plaintiffs and the defendants or the people that are aggrieved, and we can't just languish for years and years without something happening in the case.
I've seen firsthand Judge Ricciuti hold people to feet to the fire, which I really enjoyed. And literally, like in some of these medical cases, the dying, or, you know, and the case value, you know, goes dramatically down once they die. And I think it's a defense strategy, which drives me crazy, when they get these, continuances for 2 years because of a lawyer's calendar. They have other people in their law firm that can try those cases. So I ask you to keep that in mind. Other than that, I think you have a great resume, and I'm going to vote for you next week. So thank you.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you.
Service.
Thank you. Just one point. Follow up on what you said. You know, as a plaintiff's attorney, interest at 12%, that's not bad either.
What if your guy dies and it's worth five million less? Not so good.
We won't argue that issue at this point. Counselor Devaney.
Yield to Counselor Duffy,
Yes, wait.
out of order.
You're next.
Statement.
You're next. Thank you.
Oh, you want, all right.
Thank you.
Nice to you again. Thank you for all the time that you afforded me. I appreciate that. And,
Appreciate it.
I'm just amazed how you have, you know, your life, how you travel, and you're like, oh my God, I've never been anywhere. I don't have a passport. It's amazing, really. So, tell me now, you've been working as an intern and different things in different courts in different states. What do you see the difference in Massachusetts? Is there a difference in laws and rules, and what did you find when you came to Massachusetts?
I didn't practice law in any of the other states, so I probably didn't get the same snapshot that I would have if I was practicing law. But I did see a difference from my time in North Carolina. Here, I mean, the laws are relatively the same or close enough that we can say that without spending hours here. But what I can say that we see here in Massachusetts, so far anyway, was that there seem to be a lot more protections that are built in, or that the appellate courts and the trial courts seem to respect into our state constitution over and above like what maybe the federal constitution provides. Whereas some other states are willing to just say like, well, whatever the US Supreme Court says, that's what the standard is. And so I do see a little bit more willingness to look at it from that aspect, or I guess to put it differently, to be a leader. I see the Massachusetts more willingness to be a leader. I mean, after all, it wasn't long before I moved to Massachusetts that the Goodwin decision came down from the SJC, which was the first in the country. And I think that that's sort of reflected of all of the courts here in Massachusetts.
Before I ask, you know, some of your cases and your background, tell us about the boards that you have been appointed to, and if you can explain it too. You're on the Commission to the Public, Commission on Media Legal Investigation. Tell us what you did and what was that about?
Well, unfortunately, I've only been on that board for a few months. I'm sorry to Governor Healy, she'll have to replace me if I'm successful here. But the Commission on Medical Legal Investigation is a statutory organization that oversees the work of the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. And so it oversees their staffing issues, their budgetary questions, any rules that they promulgate internally, just largely the work that the Office of Chief Medical Examiner does. And the members on it are also statutory. So I sit currently in the criminal defense attorney position. It also has prosecutors on it. I believe DA Hayden is on it, as well as DA Morrissey currently. And then they also have folks that work in funeral homes and cremation services who meet together to hear about and advise the Office of Chief Medical Examiner and I presume the legislature about what they do.
No, in 25 years, I've never heard of that medial legal investigation, so thank you for that. All right, so you spent, this is, I think is something that people would be interested to know, Forensic Science Oversight Board. Tell me what you have been doing on that for the last 2 years.
Sure. The Forensic Science Oversight Board was created about 5 or 7 years ago, statutorily in the wake of the drug lab scandals here in Massachusetts, to create a body of mostly scientists, but also some lawyers. I think many people think it's just a bunch of us lawyers meeting, but it's mostly scientists who meet to review and oversee the forensic testing and forensic analysis and results that are coming out of like the Boston Crime Lab, the State Police Crime Lab, and the police departments that do forensic analysis when that evidence is making its way into court. To really question what is happening and is the evidence reliable, because that's the name of the game, I think, in all of this.
So out of the 2 years, what did you come out learning about forensic science? Anything new that is important for you as a judge?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the Forensic Science Oversight Board audited the State Police Crime Lab. We audited the Boston Police Crime Lab. And recently we were finishing our audit of the Springfield Police Department. And so as a part of that process, we have presentations to us from each of these labs and people who come and talk to us about how many cases they take in every year, how many cases they clear, any issues that they have, any issues that they need legislative support for. So for example, the Boston Police Crime Lab wanted to put cameras in at each one of their laboratory stations to record the work that they do, which I think would be very important to many litigants. And so it's certainly, I think, as we've all talked about here today, it is important for a judge to have as much knowledge as possible. And so to have knowledge about how things work, get us to the place of the case is important.
Well, I want to thank you for all the time. It was really 4 hours, but there was a lot that, to talk about. And one of the things that is so amazing to me is we talked about DNA and how that enters into the picture now than years ago. So I always thought, once you found DNA, then you knew that was the person that was guilty, no question. And this will rule that identification of the person is more important than the DNA evidence. That amazes me. And we talked about that someone identified a person. Do you want to talk about that? Talk about how the DNA does not always matter. It's the identification that saying, I know that's a person.
Sure. I think if I'm understanding your question, Counselor, so the case that you're talking about was a case I was co-counsel on out in Worcester, where the man was ultimately exonerated but not by DNA evidence. He was exonerated in part by the change in the law. But in his case, he had DNA at trial that did not sway the jury. The eyewitness testimony of the victim who was victimized by someone who broke into her home swayed the jury. I think that to your question, DNA evidence, eyewitness identification evidence, all of it are all pieces of the evidence that come in at a trial. And while it is in part on a judge as the gatekeeper to determine the reliability of the evidence that's going to go before the jury, I think that the lawyers do their best to marshal the evidence as they see that it tells the story that they're trying to tell. And as we talked about, even when you have DNA evidence, there is often nothing more powerful than a person sitting on the stand saying, that's the person I saw, or that's the person that did it to me, even if they're mistaken, even if they're wrong, even if the DNA says the exact opposite. And that's how we have innocence problems and innocence problems.
You want to tell us an example of one of the cases that we talked about?
Well, I think that case that you're providing is a perfect example of that, because DNA seemed to suggest that someone else is the perpetrator than the man that was convicted, even though he was very quite victimized by someone that broke into her home, had identified him. And it was only until many years later that using the DNA and other evidence that we were able to overturn.
No, the one, the case I'm thinking of too, particularly is, the intruder that came into the room of the
Yes.
woman and, assaulted, and she identified him. And later she found, men's shorts in her, and she turned that in, and yet it was not his DNA. And yet they still found him guilty. And so, excuse me.
Please proceed.
And so to me, I don't understand that. If you have the DNA, I thought that was conclusive. That's the person. You can identify a person in the dark. She lived in an apartment building. Maybe she passed him a lot. She didn't even know who he was, but the name, but the face was familiar. So she put that in place in her room. So that's the thing that I just don't understand. Does that happen a lot? But you did tell, why don't you tell the rest of the story? Because I'm telling it.
Well, I mean, I think that we both covered the story pretty thoroughly. I don't want, I mean, that's exactly what happened. So to your question of does that happen a lot? I mean, there have been studies of exonerations, both people on death penalty, people who've been convicted of murder, people who've been convicted of higher level felonies like the case we're describing. And eyewitness misidentification, whether it's incorrect, false, or mistaken, is the leading cause of wrongful convictions. Like 75% of people that we know from DNA testing, they were wrongfully convicted. So it does happen, yes. However, to say that, I'm not suggesting that because there's DNA evidence, that means an eyewitness can't stand and say, this is what I saw, this is what happened to me. But I do think that courts have to be careful about how lawyers and how information is communicated to the jury so that they can view the evidence presented to them in the most fair way.
So, what case was so rewarding to you that you'll always remember that one case?
So, the case that Ms. Kavanaugh spoke about, Venus case, I mean, it's an intense thing to work for a decade on a case with clients. You get to know them on a very personal level, taking other cases backwards and forwards. And like this process, you spend a lot of time preparing, a lot of time working, but then when you suddenly get to the moment where your client, the judge says, I'm going to release your client, you're starstruck. You're like, I can't believe that we've been working on this for 10 years. You almost think that maybe you're hallucinating and it's not really happening. But I was there standing next to the client while the client was in shock. He wasn't even sure that he heard the judge right. He'd been in custody for 30 years and he'd been in court. He had not been back in court since his conviction 30 years ago. And now he was back being released. And so that day of getting him released will live with me forever in a very positive.
Thank you very much. Your time has expired. Councilor Duff, please.
They voted to time us, which I think,
Councilor Duff.
because there's so many other things I want people to hear from you, and we don't because they've timed it, which, yes.
I'm sorry, you Thank you. Sorry it's late. I had a meeting with the Secretary of State's office. Your resume is stellar. Your writing, as my colleague said, is clear and concise. And I don't think there's any need to regurgitate everything that we've already heard and have studied about you. And I think you're going to be a great addition to the court, and I have no further questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I don't have any questions. Just one more. You went to UNC.
I did.
You're a Tar Heel fan?
Yes.
I'm gonna see you Saturday. I went to Boston College. It's BCUNC.
Probably will not see me, but I did have many conversations with Deputy Legal Counsel Kesselheim who went to Duke. It's a sore subject.
We're all in the ACC.
Correct.
Yeah, I don't have any questions. We had a lengthy conversation. You're a great appointment. You'll be a great addition to the Superior Court. Good luck, and I'll be more than happy to put your name before the entire council next week.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Oh, look at him already calling him judge.
Order, and I'd ask Counselor Ianella for a prayer and to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Thank you very much. We seek blessings on the task before us. Bless our efforts with clear insight, our deliberations with wisdom, our work with clarity and accuracy, and our decision with impartiality. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to
The flag
The United States of America.
to the republic
for which it stands, one nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
All right, you guys have been busy this morning. Can I recognize Counselor Jacobs for a motion to record advice and consent for the financial warrant? For a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Duff. All those in favor?
I.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. I'd like to recommend Counselor Duff for a motion to record advice and consent for the pending list of notaries public.
So move, Governor.
Thank you. Is there a second? Seconded by Counselor DiPaolo. All those in favor, say aye.
I.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. I'd like to recognize Counselor Devaney for a motion to record advice and consent for the appointment of Gloria Y. Tan to the position of Associate Justice of the Appeals Court.
Judge Tan,
Yes. Is that a motion you'd like to make, Counselor?
this is my pleasure. I presided over Tan. She went to the juvenile court. And we did have a juvenile court person on the appeals court years ago. And so she will be the only member from the juvenile court, which is very important. And Justice Justice Agnes came and spoke. And it was beautiful. I'm sorry that the councils weren't here to hear it because it was really heartfelt. But she has been such an addition to the juvenile court that the people are so anxious to have her on the appeals court, to have that, because we haven't had it in so long. I can't say enough about her because this is the second time that I had the pleasure of presiding. And I am just so honored to put her name in nomination. She is outstanding. And I really think it's important when we find someone outstanding that we elevate them to a higher court. I have a philosophy: if you work in Dunkin' Donuts and you're the assistant there, and then you should get the job when your boss leaves because you did the job. And she has. I know I'm not saying it in the right way. She deserves better, but I am so proud that the governor appointed her and so rightfully served. And they're all looking forward to having to serve with her, I know. So I make that motion.
Fantastic. Seconded by Counselor Ianella. Any further comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, I would ask Valerie to please call the roll.
Counselor Ianella,
Yes.
Counselor Duff,
Yes.
Counselor Kennedy,
Yes.
Counselor DiPaolo,
Yes.
Counselor Jacobs.
Yes.
Counselor Farrar,
Yes.
Counselor Devaney.
Yes.
7 members voting, 7 in the affirmative. The matter carries. Terrific. I'd also like to recognize Counselor Devaney another time for a motion to record advice and consent for the appointment of Kara Kreisel to the position of Associate Justice of District Court. Is that a motion made?
Just outstanding. And it was remarkable, the people that came, 5 outstanding judges who came for her in the most beautiful letter for Amy, Chief Justice of the Appeals Court. And they are welcoming her. She has been such an addition to the court and will serve. So I just can't say enough about her compassion, her caring, just as Gloria Tan. We've had good people, and I want to thank the governor for appointing these 2 outstanding nominees to the appeals court, and I make that motion.
Excellent. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Counselor DiPaolo. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, I would ask Valerie to please help us by calling the roll.
Counselor Duff,
Yes.
Counselor Kennedy,
Yes.
Counselor DiPaolo,
Yes.
Counselor Jacobs.
Yes.
Counselor Farrar,
Yes.
Counselor Devaney.
Yes.
Counselor Ianella,
Yes.
7 members voting, 7 in the affirmative, the matter carries. I'd now like to recognize Counselor Kennedy for a motion to record advice and consent for the reappointment of Stephen G. Elliott to the Appellate Tax Board.
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made by Counselor Kennedy, seconded by Counselor Ferreira. Any comments or questions? Seeing none. Oh, I'm sorry, Counselor Devaney, do you have a question or comment?
We've taken up Stephen.
Yes, right now.
If I may, he's outstanding. And, you know, he has had experience since the 70s, and we need experience. So important to keep people on who can give that experience. And he is, everyone says he's compassionate, he's caring, he's patient when people come before us. And I have to say, we have the best appellate tax court in the country. And I can't say enough about him. And we had a letter from the former chair, Hammond. Everyone says the same thing about him. So I'm very pleased that he's willing to serve again. And I thank the governor and you for appointing him again.
Thank you, Marilyn.
Well served. Thank you.
Appreciate that
Motion.
Okay. Counselor Ferreira?
Second the motion, and just add that I agree with my colleague here today. We also had Mark DeFrancisco here, the chairman of the Appellate Tax Board, testify today, who also wrote a great letter. And we also had in the audience Nick Bernier, who hails from the South. Here, he's an Appellate Tax Board member. All in favor of this reappointment, and we're looking forward to maybe Mr. Bernier getting renominated at some point as well. So thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, I would ask Valerie to help us by calling the roll.
Yes.
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 7 members voting, 7 in the affirmative, the matter carries for the reappointment of Stephen Elliott. All right, I'm going to keep us moving along. I think those are all of our judicial appointments, and we're now moving on to our list of pardons. So I'd like to recognize Counselor Jacobs for a motion to record advice and consent to pardon Richard Barnes.
Make that motion.
Seconded by Counselor DiPaolo. Any comments or questions on this? I know you guys have already had hearings. Okay, I would ask Valerie to help us by calling the roll, please.
Yes.
Jacobs. Yes.
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 7 members voting, 7 in the affirmative, the matter carries. I'd now like to recognize Counselor Jacobs for a motion to record advice and consent to pardon minor Dean Martino Boland.
I make that motion, Governor.
Is there a second? Seconded by Counselor Kennedy. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, I'd ask Valerie to please call the roll.
Jacobs. Yes.
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 7 members voting, 7 in the affirmative, the matter carries. I'd like to recognize Counselor Ianella for a motion to record advice and consent to pardon David Palazzo.
Thank you so much.
Motion has been made. Is there a second? Seconded by Counselor Jacobs. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, I'd ask Valerie to help us by please calling the roll.
Yes.
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 7 members voting, 7 in the affirmative, the matter carries. I'd now like to recognize Counselor Ferreira for a motion to record advice and consent to pardon Kara Pariseau.
So moved.
Motion's been made, seconded by Counselor DiPaolo. I wasn't sure who moved over there. Any additional questions or comments beyond those that have already been made? Okay, I'd ask Valerie to call the roll.
Yes.
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 7 members voting, 7 in the affirmative, the matter carries. I'd like to recognize Counselor Duff for a motion to record advice and consent to pardon Anthony Tyndall.
So move, Governor.
Motion's been made. Is there a second? Seconded by Counselor DiPaolo. Under discussion, Counselor Devaney?
I don't know if it's in this time to say it, but I just want to say that I thoroughly looked over the 6 pardons, and they have been approved by unanimously by the parole board, and in conference with them and what I have read, they are deserving, and so I just wanted to make that noted.
Glad you noted it. There is another layer that goes to these reviews for pardons, and we appreciate those recommendations coming out of that group. Motion's been made and seconded for Anthony Tyndall. Any other additional questions or comments? Seeing none, I'd ask Valerie to go ahead and call the roll.
Counselor Iannella,
Yes.
Counselor Duff,
Yes.
Counselor Kennedy,
Yeah.
Counselor DePaulo,
Yes.
Counselor Jacobs,
Yes.
Counselor Furman,
Yes.
Counselor Devaney,
7 members voting, 7 in the affirmative, the matter carries. I'd like to recognize Counselor Jacobs for a motion to record advice and consent to pardon Robert Tober.
I definitely make that motion, thank you.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Counselor Kennedy. Further questions or comments? Seeing none, I'd ask Valerie to please call the roll.
Counselor Duff,
Yes.
Counselor Kennedy,
Yes.
Counselor DePaulo,
Yes.
Counselor Jacobs,
Yes.
Counselor Furman,
Yes.
Counselor Devaney,
Yes.
Counselor Iannella.
Yes.
7 members voting, 7 in the affirmative, the matter carries. I think that completes our pardons. We do have 3 new nominations that need to be scheduled. One is Jennifer Bingham to the position of Associate Justice of the Probate and Family Court. I don't know if Counselor Jacobs, if you set a date and time for that hearing?
If no one objects, I'd like to set the hearing for that one for December 11th, at 10:30. And
December 11th at 10:30.
Good.
Okay. Next new nomination is Colleen Carroll for the position of Associate Justice of Probate and Family Court. This one is Counselor Ferreras. Do you have a date and time for that?
Governor, that will be December 4th at 2 p.m.
Okay. December 4th at 2 p.m. for Miss Carroll.
Killed me, Joe. Just
Sorry?
like that. Okay, so I'm
The
next.
last one, Karen Mitchell Munivar to the position of Associate Justice of Probate and Family Court.
Do we have on the, oh, I'm not gonna be here the 11th, would you choose?
Sure.
Yeah, we'll do it December 11th and, I don't know what time is open.
Which one's that?
Karen Mitchell Munivar, so 12:11, we just took 10:30. I don't know if you want to do
1.
11 at 1 p.m. Okay, I think that completes our business. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Almost.
Motion made by Counselor Ferrer, seconded by Counselor Jacobs. All those in favor, all those opposed. The ayes have it. We stand adjourned. Everybody.